I'm going to start off by saying that I fully acknowledge that this video is 100% my opinion. Technically, that's what most video essays are, but I'm not even going to try to pass this off as academic or professional. It is literally just me ranting for 20 minutes or so about why I love Team Rocket so much. I honestly would have made this video last year when we first learned that the Pokemon anime would be retiring these fan favorites, but as you may have noticed, there were quite a few videos I didn't get to work on last year, so I'm making it this year. So I recently watched through all of the original Pokemon series, and one of the things that I found was that this activity reinvigorated my love for Team Rocket, Jessie, James, and Meowth, and also Wobbuffet, but it wasn't included until later. As a kid, Team Rocket were my favorite characters in the Pokemon anime, even more than Ash and friends. They're the villains you're supposed to love, with their charming personalities and a unique brand of evil-doing that's just too incompetent to really be offended by. But there's something else about Jessie, James, and Meowth that I think really puts them over the top in terms of character design. Team Rocket is hella queer, all of them. Today, I'd like to walk you through how every single one of these three characters is, in my opinion, a rebel against the social roles that they are expected to perform in the society in which they live. My findings/beliefs are restricted to the original series, which I'm defining as Ash's journey with Misty and Brock through Kanto and Johto, since those are the episodes I actually watched, and also because there's something about these first 5 seasons that makes them special, in my opinion, when looking at Team Rocket's character development. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Now at first glance, there doesn't seem to be anything queer about Jessie. There's no letter of the LGBTQIA+ that immediately comes to mind when I think of her. Some people have speculated that she's a lesbian, usually because people also think James is gay, and while I'm not saying she's not attracted to women, it's not one of her defining characteristics. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be using the word queer kind of loosely, but I promise there's a reason. You see, one of the things that I noticed when rewatching the first 5 seasons of the Pokemon anime is that each member of Team Rocket is actually mirrored by one of Ash's main traveling companions, and comparing the members of Team Rocket with their good guy counterpart highlights some of the more interesting parts of their characterization and the message that gets sent about social roles and expectations in the Pokemon world. Jessie's foil in the main cast is Misty. They're both the only woman or girl in their respective group, they're both redheads, and comparing the two shows us something about the role of women and girls in the Pokemon world. There's a lot of attention drawn to the angry, loud, or mean behaviors that both Jessie and Misty exhibit at various parts of the show, and there's always a gendered element to it. Misty is routinely mean to Ash, and she's not without her reasons, and Jessie is often mean to her friends as well. The comments that Ash and Brock or James and Meowth make about these characters explicitly reference how that kind of behavior is somehow unladylike or not very girly.
Now that's what I call a real lady, not a tough, mean, nasty girl like Jessie.
I'll show you tough, mean, and nasty.
I hate the way she treats us, but I like the way she looks.
Yeah, not like some other girls who treat you bad and look even worse.
At first, it actually seems like Misty is the one who's breaking gender rules, as a quote tomboyish mermaid living in the shadow of her 3 older sisters, who are all feminine beauty icons. However, after her Cerulean City gym battle with Ash, she develops into a fairly gender-conforming girl with stereotypically girly hobbies like shopping and an obsession with cute Pokemon. She's very maternal and protective of Togepi, where Jessie seems to have almost the opposite reaction to Wobbuffet, the Johto addition to Team Rocket. However, one of the biggest places where these two characters diverge is the extreme importance placed on their physical feminine beauty, because I guess the Pokemon world is patriarchal too. Jessie and Misty are constantly competing over which of the two is more beautiful, more ladylike, and it's always men who ultimately get to be the judges of who's better at performing ideal femininity. Jessie is treated as an old hag, past her prime, because she's 25? Is that old now? I thought Japan had one of the longest average lifespans in the world. By contrast, Misty is framed as the beautiful, eye-catching, 10-year-old child that most men prefer over Jessie. Yeah, so it's actually really uncomfortable just how common it is for adult men throughout the original series to pause and admire Misty's beauty and even explicitly contrast her to the supposed faded beauty of Jessie, who is the only one of these two any of these men should actually be attracted to. This conflict comes to a head in Season 1, Episode 52, Princess vs. Princess, which is actually about Hinamatsuri, a holiday in Japan centered around celebrating girls and women. In this episode, we get to see in full force the tension between Jessie's adult womanhood and Misty's young girlhood. In this episode, the two of them participate in the Queen of the Princess Festival contest with the goal of winning a Pokemon Princess doll set modeled after the typical Hinamatsuri doll set to reconcile their respective childhood disappointments. Misty has never actually had her own dolls, only getting roughed up hand-me-downs from her older sisters, while Jessie was considered not feminine enough, even as a little girl, to be worthy of a doll set. It's literally a competition of the performance of womanhood where both of the judges are men, all of the contestants are women, and the prize is a symbol of ideal femininity and the resulting validation from said men and bragging rights over the other women and girls. The contest starts with a beauty competition, of course, but the second half is a Pokemon battling tournament. The two face off in the finals as a symbolic battle of their constant rivalry. In the end, Misty wins the competition and gets the doll set, but she doesn't keep it with her. Instead, she sends it back to the Cerulean City gym as a symbol of her success at performing girlhood that will make her sisters jealous. Even though Jessie didn't win anything, she wasn't ladylike enough by the standards of men, that doesn't stop James and Meowth from dressing up all of the members of Team Rocket as Pokemon Princess dolls to appease Jessie and show her that, even if no one else agrees, she'll always be a princess to them. Now when you say the words queer and Team Rocket in the same sentence, most people's minds go straight to James, and for good reason. One of the best things about James as a character is that he cross-dresses. And even as a kid, I was very consciously aware that this was one of his best qualities. I started casually watching the anime with my brother during the Diamond and Pearl series, but I really got into it when I turned 10 and got my first Pokemon video game during the Black and White series. There were a lot of experimental decisions made during the Black and White series, from getting rid of Brock for the first time to that brief moment when Team Rocket was actually good at their jobs. But one decision that we should all be able to agree was objectively bad for the overall quality of the series as a whole was that James stopped cross-dressing. No more dresses, no more skirts, not even a glossy lip and some eyeliner. I'm sorry that the writer of this series doesn't like fun. Who hurt you and why are you making it my problem? And sure, he impersonated Ash that one time in the X and Y series, which was pretty funny.
And this is my partner, Pikachu!
Huh? Your Pikachu can float in the air?
That's from lots of special training!
But it's just not the same. I stopped watching the anime sometime during the X and Y series, which actually has nothing to do with Team Rocket, but for a while I was pretty out of touch with the goings-on of the Pokemon anime. So imagine my surprise when I started watching the Sun and Moon series on what used to be Pokemon TV, and I saw this. My heart did backflips in my chest, the skies opened up, and the heavens sang out sweet, sweet hallelujah. James's foil in the main cast is Brock, who doesn't exactly subscribe to a rigid traditional performance of masculinity either. In episode 5, Showdown in Pewter City, we meet Brock as the 15-year-old caretaker for a bunch of small children in a household with no parents. He's literally wearing a maid outfit as he performs various domestic duties for all of his siblings. Brock acts as the caretaker, doctor, and cook to Ash and Misty in their journey across Kanto and Johto, which, honestly just reminds me how little adult supervision these kids have. So Brock actually represents a very healthy model of masculinity that involves caretaking and domestic labor, and that's really cool. But by comparing him with James, we begin to see exactly where the lines are between acceptable and unacceptable behavior for men and boys. Brock is the sturdy and tough rock-type gym leader. In his gym, he's presented as an intimidating, powerful figure that seems almost impossible to overcome. James, on the other hand, is an elegant, flamboyant, flaming Moltres who's always flipping his hair and carrying around a rose and cross-dressing, even in situations where he really doesn't have to. Where James celebrates his bachelorhood,
They prepared for trouble and made ours double.
At least I'm still single.
and rejects even the thought of getting married,
Fiance, just the word gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Brock falls head over heels for just about every woman he sees.
It doesn't get any better than this. Nurse Joys and Officer Jennies everywhere. You're the Joy from Saffron City, and you're the Joy from Celadon City. Remember me?
Now we could spend all day speculating about James's sexuality. I'm personally not a fan of assuming a man is gay just because he's not actively pursuing a relationship with a woman, but no matter what you believe about who he may or may not be attracted to, there's no denying that James is a queer icon. James as a queer icon is interesting to me for another reason. In episode 48, Holy Matrimony, we learn that unlike Jesse and Meowth, who both grew up in poverty before joining Team Rocket, James actually had a very wealthy and privileged upbringing. He grew up in a mansion on an estate with rich parents and servants who took care of his every need. Not only that, but as an only child, he was the only one in line to inherit wealth beyond most people's imaginations. How could someone so set up for success like that end up a common criminal working for an evil organization like Team Rocket? As it turns out, James's inheritance came with a cost, an arranged marriage. Jezebel is James's fiancée, who's absolutely obsessed with marrying him and turning him into a proper upper-class gentleman.
You can't just do whatever you feel like anymore. Now you'll obey Jezebel. Let the entertainment begin!
James understandably doesn't like Jezebel, and the idea of having to marry her and submit to the miserable rules of upper-class society for the rest of his life just isn't worth the money and status he would get from going through with it. Watching this scene as an adult honestly hit like a truck just because of how real it is. Several studies of homeless youth in the United States have reported that LGBTQ youth make up a disproportionately high percentage of the homeless population compared to their share of the overall population. Queer youth are more likely to live in situations of unstable housing or end up in the foster care system than their cisgender heterosexual counterparts. And even queer adults, single or paired, are less likely to own our own homes than our cisgender heterosexual counterparts. An article put out by the Trevor Project collected data from various studies and reports that 28% of LGBTQ youth say they've experienced homelessness or housing instability at some point in their life. That's a rate of more than 1 for every 4. These numbers are often related to a lack of support from parents. Knowing this really puts James's story into perspective. James had a place to live. He had a house, a family, and even wealth. He could have had it all, but it came with strings attached. A loveless marriage to a person whose feelings he could never reciprocate. And that was too much, so he ran away from home. Now he lives with his chosen family, a group of homeless queerdos just like him, just trying to make it in a cruel world.
But I'm a creep. I'm a widow.
They say prepare for trouble, make it double, but really you should be making it triple. Team Rocket's Meowth is the third member of this duo that's really a trio, and much like Jessie, not someone you would initially think of as queer. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be referring to Meowth with the pronoun it rather than the typical he, him, and before we can continue, I need to explain why. In the original Pokemon games, there were no male and female Pokemon. This was reflected in the original series of the anime, where all Pokemon, including Team Rocket's Meowth, were referred to as it. Eventually, Meowth came to be referred to as he, him, or it across various episodes and lines of dialogue, which could reflect the introduction of the breeding mechanic in the game and the existence of male and female Pokemon, but the problem with that is that just about every other Pokemon in the show is still an it. Instead, the change in pronouns likely has to do with the fact that, despite being a Pokemon, Meowth is a very human-like character. It speaks, it walks on 2 feet, and it even dresses up like a person sometimes. The idea of using it to refer to a character who's so human-like makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but I'd like to make the case that maybe we shouldn't be. Non-binary people like myself often talk about the struggle of not having a gender-neutral third-person singular pronoun in the English language. But that's not completely true. English has always had a gender-neutral third-person singular pronoun. Just like he and she, the English pronoun it is a relic from a time when all nouns in the English language had one of 3 grammatical genders: masculine, feminine, or neuter. This same system appears in languages like German, Russian, and Latin. In the transition to modern English, grammatical gender was lost on nouns, but all 3 third-person singular pronouns remained, giving us the system we're familiar with today, where he is used for human men and boys, male animals, and is generally treated as the default. She is used for human women and girls, female animals, and possessions like boats and cars, and it is most often used for non-human animals, plants, objects, and abstract ideas. These days, it is only used for humans to show contempt or disgust for their very existence, or imply that they're somehow less than human, and in its place, singular they has arisen as the standard gender-neutral third-person singular for humans. If you're a native English speaker, this system is probably so natural to you that you don't even take the time to question why the gender-neutral third-person singular it is the only pronoun in the entire English language that has explicitly non-human connotations. There is a small community of non-binary people who are trying to reclaim its pronouns for human use, but that's an uphill battle against a 1,000-year history of associating gender neutrality with non-humanity in the English language. But that's not good enough for me, because, in case you haven't noticed, Meowth is literally not a human being. So why does this non-human character have to have human gendered pronouns anyway? And why he, him, and not she, her? Meowth's only Japanese voice actor and its American voice actor for the majority of the original series were both women, and it wasn't even confirmed to be male in universe until the Diamond and Pearl series over 600 episodes in. So if we're gonna assign gendered human pronouns to a cat, why not she, her? Well, it might have something to do with Meowth's backstory of falling in love with a female Meowth named Meowsy and the apparent need to prevent a severely sapphic subplot. But weren't you paying attention? Meowth was voiced by a woman in this episode. Twice! I'm not saying Meowth should use she, her pronouns. Personally, I prefer the gender-neutral analysis because it means there's a woman, a man, and a non-binary member of Team Rocket. But calling Meowth him makes about as much sense as calling it her. And before you say it, yes, I am fishing for non-binary representation in a literal non-human character. It's like Red from OSP once said.
I don't know about you, but I'm kind of tired of absorbing the social background radiation that major defining qualities of who I am as a person are only ever seen in people who aren't people, just, personal preference.
So Meowth is a non-binary sapphic who uses it, its, and he, him pronouns. But that's not the only thing that makes this character queer. Meowth's foil in the main cast is Pikachu, and just like before, the two of them have a few characteristics in common. Before Togepi and Wobbuffet were introduced, Meowth and Pikachu were the only two Pokemon who consistently stayed outside of a Pokeball. Another parallel I find interesting is that originally, both Meowth and Pikachu were the earliest stages of their respective evolutionary lines, with Pikachu evolving into Raichu with the use of a Thunderstone, and Meowth evolving into Persian by leveling up in battle. Both Pokemon are shown to have occasional rivalries with their evolved forms, Ash's Pikachu versus Lieutenant Surge's Raichu, and Team Rocket's Meowth versus Giovanni's Persian. These conflicts highlight the insecurities and feelings of inadequacy that come from being in an evolved state. However, just like with Jessie and Misty or James and Brock, the differences between Meowth and Pikachu tell us something about the socially constructed role that Pokemon are supposed to play in the Pokemon world. Pikachu is an extremely loyal Pokemon who is always by Ash's side. It wasn't always like that. In the first episode, Ash literally had to wear rubber gloves and tie a rope around Pikachu so he could drag it along without being electrocuted. But even by the end of the first episode, the two had already established a pretty strong bond. Conversely, Meowth's trainer is presumed to be Giovanni, a distant, obscured figure who is most commonly referred to as the boss. That doesn't mean that Meowth doesn't like Giovanni. In fact, the opposite is true. Meowth worships Giovanni and wants nothing more than to gain his approval, just like Jessie and James. But it's Meowth's constant failure to live up to Giovanni's expectations that makes this relationship so different from the relationship between Ash and Pikachu.
What about Meowth? Ain't I your favorite anymore?
I'm totally disgusted watching you fail me when I expect total perfection. Perfection like this beautiful Persian.
Pikachu is also Ash's ace Pokemon, being able to deal and take more damage than a normal Pikachu would be able to. Meanwhile, Meowth has little to no experience in battle and is practically useless for fighting. And that brings us to the main message of the parallel between Meowth and Pikachu. In the world of Pokemon, Pokemon are supposed to be loyal and useful tools for their human trainers. In the original series, Pokemon trainers are referred to as masters, which can be a bit uncomfortable at times. Team Rocket's Meowth is a Pokemon who is consistently unable to live up to the expectations that humans have of it, thereby making it a social reject. However, there's another use that humans get out of owning their own Meowth specifically. The Pokemon Meowth in general is based on a Maneki Neko, a cat-shaped figurine used in Japan as a good luck charm. This is reflected in its signature move, Payday, a normal type move that only does a small amount of damage, but causes the trainer to pick up some extra money after battle. In the anime, the gold coins that Meowth produce are economically valuable, which honestly sounds like it would just break the economic system, but whatever. In the episode Meowth Rules, we learn that Team Rocket's Meowth can't learn the move Payday. The explanation given for this is that Meowth spent so much energy learning how to speak human that it's now unable to learn the move Payday.
I'd love to make money, Jimmy, but I put so much energy into learning how to talk that I just can't learn Payday.
Oh well.
And that's interesting, because Meowth is one of the only Pokemon in the entire anime that can speak to humans. So why did Meowth learn to speak human? How? That story comes to us in Season 1, Episode 2, Go West Young Meowth, when Meowth recants the tale of how it fell in love with Meowsy, a female Meowth with a rich trainer and one of the only other Pokemon in the original series to use gendered pronouns, namely she/her. Meowsy rejected Meowth's love, saying that she was more impressed by her rich human trainer than a dirty street cat like Meowth.
She's a rich lady, and she can buy me anything I want. And what are you? You're not rich. You're not even human. You're just a street Meowth.
In an attempt to impress Meowsy and win her love, Meowth learned how to speak human and walk upright on two legs. When Meowth went back to show Meowsy that it had learned how to speak like a human and walk upright, Meowsy rejected it once again, saying that even if it could walk and talk like a human, it would always be a Pokemon. In fact, Meowth was even more repulsive to her now because of its inability to behave like a proper Pokemon or a proper human. By learning how to speak human and walk on two legs, Meowth didn't become a human. It became a freak, caught between two worlds, not quite belonging to either one. And this is a significant part of Meowth's characterization throughout the entire show. There's this scene in the Princess vs. Princess episode where Jessie's getting ready for the battling portion of the contest, and she has to select 4 Pokemon to use in battle. She chooses Arbok and borrows James's Weezing, but that's only 2 Pokemon against the 4 that all of her opponents will have. Meowth tells her that she can't possibly compete with 2 Pokemon, to which she responds, "You're right," and the two just silently stare at each other before Meowth has the hilarious realization,
I'm a Pokemon too!
It's funny, but to me it highlights how Meowth as a character fundamentally blurs the line between human and Pokemon. It's a human in a Pokemon's body. It's a Pokemon in a human's world, constantly trying to live up to both expectations and failing due to its affiliation with the other. It's a translator, a bridge for communication between humans and Pokemon. It grew up as an animal in the big city, and now it hangs out with other humans as they camp out together in the woods. Meowth as a character fundamentally transgresses everything we know to be true about the social roles of the Pokemon world, and for that, it fits right in with Jessie and James as a member of Team Rocket. Now there's something I find interesting about all of these parallels between Team Rocket and Ash's traveling companions. Misty was a tomboy who was constantly out-femmed by her sisters until she met Ash, and now she gets to be the feminine beauty icon that Jessie fails to live up to. Brock was an overwhelmed caregiver drowning in domestic labor for a bunch of little children until he met Ash, and now he gets to travel the country ogling over women while James sits in financial ruin over his refusal to marry a woman. Pikachu started out as a rebel Pokemon who wouldn't obey orders until it met Ash, and it became the loyal, compliant battling partner / tool that Meowth could never be. They've each retained some elements of nonconformity. Misty is still bossy and mean sometimes, Brock still does most of the cooking and caretaking, Pikachu still doesn't stay inside its Pokeball. However, there's something to be said about how Ash draws Misty, Brock, and Pikachu to fulfill their social roles, while the organization Team Rocket draws Jessie, James, and Meowth to break them even further. If I wanted to, I could even look deeper into the parallels between Ash, the bright and charming main character and the face of the Pokemon anime, and Giovanni, a dark, obscure figure whose face is never seen and who is only referenced in epithet. But Giovanni is a pretty boring character throughout most of the original series, and I really just wanted to rant about why Jessie, James, and Meowth are a bunch of queer icons, so I'll leave that for someone else to do. And that's how a dominatrix, a drag queen, and a reverse furry became the favorite characters of my entire childhood. Thank you for listening. Happy Pride Month.
Trouble,